go. Tonight we're reading Fairy Tales. It was written by Marion Florence Lansing in 1907. These are a collection of fairy tales that we should all know and love. The first one tonight is called Hans in Luck. Hans in Luck. Hans has served his master 7 years, and at the end of that time he said to him, "Master, my time is up now. I should like to go home to my mother, so give me my wages if you please." His master answered, "You have served me faithfully and well, and as the service has been, so shall the wages be." And he gave him a lump of gold as big as his head. Hans pulled the handkerchief out of his pocket, wrapped the lump in it, slung it over his shoulder, and set out on the way home. As he was trudging painstakingly the laborious long road, a horseman came along, trotted happily and briskly along in a spirited horse. "Ah," said Hans aloud, "what a fine thing riding is. There you sit, as comfortable as in a chair. You stumble over no stones and save your shoes, and you get over the ground you hardly know how." The horseman overheard him, stopping, and said, "Hello, Hans, why do you go on foot then?" "I can't help it," answered Hans, "for I have this bundle to carry home. It is gold. To be sure that I cannot hold my head straight, for it hurts my shoulders too." "I will tell you what," said the horseman. "We shall exchange. I will give you my horse, and you give me your lump." "With all my heart," said Hans, "but I tell you beforehand that you're taking a good heavy load on yourself." The horseman got down, took the gold, and helped Hans up, putting the bridle into his hands, and said, "Now, when you want to go really good pace, you must click your tongue and cry, 'Giddy up, giddy up.'" Hans was delighted when he found himself sitting on a horse and riding along so freely and easily. After a while, it occurred to him that he might go still faster, and he began clicking his tongue and crying, "Giddy up, giddy up." The horse broke into a gallop, and before Hans knew what he was about, he was thrown off and was lying in the ditch which separated the field from the high road. The horse would have run away if it had not been stopped by a peasant who was coming along the road and driving a cow before him. Hans felt himself all over and picked himself up, but he was vexed and said to the peasant, "This riding on horseback is no joke, I can tell you, especially when a man gets on a mare like mine that kicks and throws him off so that it is a wonder one's neck is not broken. Never again will I ride that animal. Now, I like your cow. You can walk quietly along behind her, and you have milk, butter, and cheese every day into the bargain. What would I not give for such a cow?" "Well now," said the peasant, "if you so much pleasure as all that, I don't mind exchanging the cow for the horse." Hans agreed to this with the greatest delight, and the peasant, swinging himself upon the horse, rode off in a hurry. Hans drove his cow peacefully before him and thought over his lucky bargain. "If I only have a bit of bread, and I ought never to be without that, I can have butter and cheese, which is often as I like. If I am thirsty, I have only to milk the cow, and I have milk to drink. What more could a heart's desire? When he came to an inn, he made a halt and ate with great satisfaction all the bread he had brought with him for dinner and supper, and spent his last 2 farthings for a glass of beer to drink. Then he drove his cow along in the direction of his mother's village. The heat grew more and more oppressive as the middle of the day grew near, and Hans found himself in a wide heath which it would take about an hour to cross, and he was very hot and thirsty. This is easy to remedy, thought Hans. Welcome in, we're reading fairy tales. I will milk the cow and refresh myself with the milk. He tied her to a tree, and as he had no pail to put his leather cap underneath, but try as hard as he could, not a drop of milk came. He put himself in the very awkward position too, and at last the impatient beast gave him such a tumble to the ground and was so dazed that for a long time he could not think where he was. Fortunately, a butcher came along, trundling a wheelbarrow in which lay a young pig. He thought Hans told him what had happened. The butcher handed him his flask and said, "Take a drink. It'll do you good. That cow might well give no milk. She's an old beast and only fit at best for the plow or for the butcher." Dear, dear, thought Hans, running his fingers through his hair. Who would have thought it? It is an idea to eat the beast and have the meat, but I do not care much for beef. It's not juicy enough. Now a young pig like yours, that is what would taste good. And then there's the sausage. Take heed, Hans, said the butcher. Out of love for you, I will exchange and let you have the pig for the cow. May heaven reward you for your kindness, sir, cried Hans, handing over the cow as the butcher untied the pig from the barrow and put into his hand the string with which it was tied. Hans went on again, thinking how everything was turning out just as he wished. Hey, happy lifestyle, welcome in. Presently, Hans went on again, how everything turned out. If he did meet with any mishap, it was immediately set right. Presently, a lad overtook him who was carrying a fine white goose under his arm. They said good morrow to each other. Then Hans began at once to tell of his good luck and how he always made such good bargains. The lad told him that he was taking the goose to a christening feast. Just lift it, he said to Hans, holding it up by the wings, and feel how heavy it is. It's been fattening up for the last 8 weeks. Whoever gets to taste a taste of it when it is roasted will get a rare bit. Yes, said Hans, weighing it in one hand. It's a good weight, but my pig's no trifle either. Meanwhile, the lad kept looking suspiciously from one side to the other and shook his head. Look here, he began. I'm not sure it's all right with your pig. In the village through which I passed, the mayor himself had just had one stolen from his sty. I fear you may have gotten hold of it there in your hand. They have set out people to look for it, and it would be bad business for you if you were found with it. At the very least, you should be shut up in the dark hole. Oh, honest Hans, very much frightened. Alas, he said, help me out of this trouble. You are more at home in these parts than I am. Take my pig and let me have your goose. I shall run some risk if I do, answered the lad, but I will not be the cause of your getting in trouble. So he took the cord in his hand and drove the pig quickly away a side by a side path. Honest Hans, relieved of his anxiety, plodded along towards home with a goose under his arm. When I really come to think it over, he said, I have even gained by this exchange. First, hey, Happy. Hey, Nicky, good to see you. First, there is the good roast, then the quality of fat that will drip out of it roasting and will keep us in goose fat to eat on our bread for a quarter of a year. And last of all, there are the fine white feathers, which I will stuff my pillow, and the morning I shall sleep like a top. How delighted my mother will be. As he was going through the last village, he came to a knife grinder with his cart, singing as he wheeled hurriedly, busily around. Scissors and knives I grind quickly, while my coat flies out of the wind behind. Hans stopped to watch him. At last he spoke to him. You appear to have a very good business, if I may judge by your merry song. Yes, answered the knife grinder. The business has a golden bottom. Very good grinder finds money in his pocket wherever he puts his hand in. But where did you buy that fine goose? I did not buy it, but took it in exchange for my pig. And the pig I got for a cow, and the cow I took for the horse, and the horse I gave a lump of coal as big as my head, a gold as big as my head, and the gold, oh, that was my wages for 7 years of service. You certainly know how to look after yourself each time, said the grinder. If only you could get on so far as to hear the money jingle in your pocket whenever you stand up, you will indeed have made your fortune. How shall I manage that? Said Hans. You must become a grinder like me. Nothing in particular is needed for it but a grindstone. Everything else will come of itself. I have one of those here. To be sure, it's a little worn, but you need not give me anything for it but your goose. Will you do it? How can you ask? Said Hans. Why, I shall be the luckiest man in the world. If I have money every time I put my hand into my pocket, what more can I have to trouble about? So he handed him the goose and took the grinding stone in exchange. Now, said the grinder, picking up an ordinary big stone that lay by the road, here is another good stone in the bargain. You can hammer out all your old nails on it and straighten them. Take it with you and keep it carefully. Hans shouldered the stone and walked on with a light heart, his eyes shining with joy. I must have been born under a lucky star, he exclaimed. Everything happens to me just as I want it. Meanwhile, as he had been on his legs since daybreak, he began to feel tired. He was hungry too, for in his joy at the bargain by which he got his cow, he had eaten up his store of food at once and had had none since. At last he felt quite unable to go further and was forced to rest every minute or two. Besides, the stone weighed him down dreadfully. He could not help thinking how nice it would be if he did not have to carry them any further. He dragged himself slowly over to a well in a field, meaning to rest and refresh himself with a draught of cool water. To keep the stone from hurting him while he knelt to drink, he laid them carefully on the edge of the well. Then he sat down and was about to stoop and drink, but made a slip, which gave the stone a little push, and both of them rolled off and into the water. When Hans saw them sinking to the bottom, he jumped for joy and knelt down and thanked God, tears in his eyes, for having shown him his further favor and relieved him of the heavy stone, which were the only things that had troubled him, without him having anything to reproach himself with. There is no man under the sun so lucky as I, he cried out. Then, with a big, light heart and free from every burden, he ran until he reached his mother's house. How about that one? Welcome in, everybody. We are reading classic fairy tales. It was written in was compiled in 1907 by Marion Florence Lansing. I need a sip. The next story we're reading tonight is called Diamonds and Toads. I don't think I know this one. Once upon a time, there was a widow who had 2 daughters. The elder was so much like her, both in looks and in character, that her daughter saw the mother. They were both so disagreeable and so proud that there was no living with them. The younger, who was the image of her father in courtesy and was one of the most beautiful girls ever seen. People naturally love those who are like them. This mother doted upon the elder daughter and at the same time conceived a great aversion to the younger. She made her eat in the kitchen and work continually. Among other things, the poor child had to go twice a day to draw water, more than 1.5 miles from the house, and bring home a large pitcher full of it. One day, when she was at the fountain, a poor woman came to her and asked her to let her have a drink. "Oh, yes, with all my heart, goodly," the little girl, raising the pitcher at once. She filled it at the clearest part of the fountain and gave it to her, holding up the pitcher all the while that she might drink more easily. The good woman said to her, "You are so pretty, so good, and so courteous that I cannot help but give you a gift." For this was a fairy who had taken the form of a poor country woman to see how far the civility and good manners of this young girl would go. "I will give you a gift," continued the fairy, "that at every word you speak, there shall come out of your mouth either a flower or a jewel." When the pretty girl got home, her mother scolded her from staying so long at the fountain. "I ask your pardon, Mamma," said the girl, for not making more haste. As she spoke these words, there fell from her lips 3 roses, 3 pearls. "What do I see here?" asked the mother, quite astonished. "I think I see pearls and diamonds that came out of the girl's mouth. How did this happen, child?" This was the first time she'd ever been called "my child." The girl told her frankly all that had happened to her, dropping from her mouth great numbers of diamonds as she spoke. "Really," cried the mother, "I must send my own daughter thither. Fanny, Fanny, look, see what comes out of your sister's mouth when she speaks. Would you not like, my dear, to have the same gift? You have to only go draw water at the fountain, and when the poor woman asks you, you let her have a drink, to give it to her very civilly." "I should like to see myself going to the fountain to draw water," said this ill-bred minx. "I insist you go," said the mother, "and go at once." So away she went, taking with her the best silver tankard in the house, but grumbling all the way. No sooner had she reached the fountain than she saw coming out of the woods a lady in a dress who came up to her and asked for a drink. This was the same fairy who had appeared to her sister, but she had now taken the air and dress of a princess to see how far this girl's rudeness would go. I am I am I come here, said the ill-bred saucy girl, to serve you with water? Pray, I suppose this silver tankard was brought wholly on purpose for your ladyship. Was it? I should think so. Just drink out of the fountain if you want any. You're hardly polite, answered the fairy, without putting herself in a passion. Well, then, since you are so disobliging, I give for you a gift, that every word you speak there should come out of your mouth a snake or a toad. As soon as her mother saw her coming home, cried out, Well, daughter? Well, mother, answered the rude girl, throwing out of her mouth a viper and a toad. Oh, mercy, cried the mother, what is this I see? It is her sister who is the cause of all this. She shall pay for it. And immediately she ran to beat her. The poor child fled away from her and went to hide herself in the forest nearby. The king's son, as he was returning from his hunting, met her, and seeing how beautiful she was, asked her what she was doing there all alone, and why was she crying. Alas, sir, my mother has turned me out of doors. The king's son, seeing 5 or 6 pearls and as many diamonds fall from her mouth, desired to tell him how that happened. Then she told him the whole story. The king's son fell in love with her and considered that such a gift was worth more than any marriage portion anyone else could bring, conducted her to the palace of the king, his father, and there married her. As for the sister, she made herself so much hated that her own mother turned her out of doors. The miserable girl, wandering about without finding anyone who would take her in, went away to the corner of the world where she passed away. All right, our next story is Puss in Boots. Snuggle in and get reading to get us set for bed. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a miller who, when he died, had nothing to leave his 3 sons but his mill, his ass, and his cat. The division was soon made. Neither the notary nor any were sent for. They would have eaten up all the poor patrimony. The oldest had the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The youngest was quite downcast at having so poor a share. My brothers, he said, may get their living handsomely enough by joining their portions together. But as for me, when I've eaten my cat and made me a muff of his skin, I must perish from hunger. The cat, who heard all this without appearing to do so, came up to him and said in a grave and serious air, Do not thus afflict yourself, my good master. You have only to give me a bag and get a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and brambles, and you shall see that you have not so poor a portion in me as you imagine. Though the cat's master did not build great hopes on what he said, yet he had seen him play such cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, such as hanging himself by his heels or hiding himself in the meal to make believe as he was dead, that he did not altogether despair of helping him. When the cat had what he had asked for, he booted himself very gallantly, and putting his bag about his neck, he took hold of the two strings with his forepaws and went into a warren where there was a great many rabbits. He put bran and parley, he put bran and parsley into the bag and mount himself out at full length as if he were dead. He waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with the snares and tricks of this world, to come rummaging his bag for what he had put into it. Scarcely had he laid down before his wish was fulfilled, and a rash of foolish young rabbit jumped headlong into his bag, and Master Puss immediately drew close the strings and unalived him without mercy. Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace and asked to speak with the king. He was shown upstairs to the king's apartment, and making a low bow, said to him, "I have brought you, sire, a rabbit from the warren of my lord, the Marquis of Carabas," for that was the title which he was pleased to give his master, "which he was commanded to present to your majesty with the assurance of his respect." "Tell your master," said the king, "that I thank him, and that he has given me a great pleasure." Another time he went and hid himself among some standing corn, holding his bag open as before, and when a brace of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings and caught them both. He then went and presented these to the king, as he had previously done with the rabbit when he took in the warren. The king, liked the manner receiving the king in like manner, hasten here, welcome in. The king in like manner received the partridges with great pleasure and ordered his servants to reward him. In this way the cat continued for 2 or 3 months to carry to his majesty from time to time game of his master's taking. One day, when he knew that the king was intended to take the air along the riverside with his daughter, who was the most beautiful princess in the world. Samir, welcome in. We're reading fairy tales. Guys, the princess is the most beautiful masters and said, "If you follow my advice, your fortune is made. You have to only go and bathe in the river, just the place I shall show you, and leave the rest to me." The Marquis of Carabas did just what the cat advised, without knowing what would be the good in doing so. While he was bathing, the king passed by, and the cat began to cry out with all his might, "Help, help, my lord, Marquis of Carabas is drowning." In this noise, the king put his head out of the coach window, and seeing it was the cat who had so often brought him presents of game, commanded his guards to run immediately to his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas. While they were drawing the poor Marquis out of the river, the cat came up to the coach and told the king that while his master was bathing, there had come by some rogues who ran off with his clothes, though he could cried out, "Thieves, thieves," several times as loud as he could. The cunning cat hid them under a great stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to run and fetch one of the best suits for the Lord Marquis of Carabas. The king loaded the marquis with 1,000 attendants and a fine clothes as he had given him, set off with his good looks, for he was well made and comely. The king's daughter found him very much to her liking, and the Marquis of Carabas had no sooner cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances in her direction than she fell in love with him to distraction. The king insisted on getting into the coach and taking a ride with them. The cat, overjoyed at seeing how well his plan was beginning to succeed, ran on before, and coming upon some countrymen who were mowing a meadow, said to them, "Good people, if you do not tell the king, who presently passed by this way, that the meadow which you are mowing belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as the herbs for the pot." The king did not fail to ask the mowers to whom the meadow they were mowing belonged to my lord Marquis of. They answered all together, for the cat's threat had frightened them. "You have a very fine piece of land, Lord Marquis," said the king. "Yes, sire," replied the marquis. "This is a meadow which never a plentiful harvest every year." The cat, who still went on before, met some reapers, and said to them, "Good people, if you do not say to the king, who will presently pass this way, that all this corn belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king, who passed by a moment after, wished to know whom all the corn before him belonged. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," replied the reapers, and the king was again very well pleased with the marquis. The cat continued to go before the carriage and say the same words to everyone he met, and the king was astonished at the vast estates of my lord Marquis of Carabas. The cat came at last to a stately castle, the master of which was an ogre, the richest ever known, for all the lands the king had been passing through belonged to this castle. The cat, who had taken care to inform himself who this ogre was and what he could do, asked to speak with him, saying he could not pass so near his castle without having the honor of paying his respects to him. The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre could, and made him sit down. "I have been assured," said the cat, "that if you have a gift of being able to change yourself into all sorts of animals, if you have a mind to, that you can, for example, transform yourself into a lion or an elephant." "It is true," answered the ogre roughly, "and to convince you, you shall see now me become a lion." The cat was so terrified at the sight of the lion so near him that he sprang away and climbed up on the roof, but not without much difficulty and danger, as his boots were of no use for walking upon tiles. A little while after, when he saw that the ogre had quit the form of the lion, he came down and owned that he had been a good deal frightened. "I have been further informed, but I don't know if I believe it," said the cat, "that you also have the power of taking the smallest animal. For example, you could change yourself into a rat or a mouse, but I must own that this has to be impossible." "Impossible!" cried the ogre. "You shall see." And at the same instant he changed himself into a mouse and began to run about the floor. The moment the cat saw the ogre in this form, he sprang upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile, the king saw as he passed the fine castle of the ogres had a mind to go in. Master Puss, hearing the noise of his Majesty's coach cross the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, "Your Majesty is welcome to the castle of my Lord Marquis of Carabas." "What, my Lord Marquis?" cried the king, "and this is your castle? There can be nothing finer than this court and all these stately buildings that surround it. Let us see the interior, if you please." The Marquis gave his hand to the young princess and followed the king, who went before. They entered a spacious hall where they found a splendid collection with which the ogre had prepared for some friends who were to visit him that very day, but who dared not enter hearing that the king was there. The king was so charmed with all the good qualities of my lord the Marquis of Carabas, and his daughter had fallen so violently in love with him that, seeing the vast estate he possessed, he said to him at the end of the dinner, "It depends only on you, my lord Marquis, if you are not my son-in-law." The Marquis, with a low bow, accepted the honor which his Majesty conferred upon him. Forthwith, the very same day, married the princess. Puss in Boots became a great lord and never ran after mice any more, except for his amusement. Guess what the next story is? Hold on, I have to throw a shoe real quick. The next story. We are reading fairy tales. All right, one more. My throat is so sore. All right. Once upon a time, there lived a man and his wife who were very sad because they had no children. These people had a little window at the back of their house which overlooked a beautiful garden full of flowers and herbs. There was a garden, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to a witch of great power who was feared by everyone. One day, the woman stood at the window looking into the garden and saw a bed full of the finest rampion. It looked so fresh and green that she longed to eat some of it. This desire grew every day as she knew she could not possibly have any of it. She pined away and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and said, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Oh," she replied sadly, "if I cannot get some of that nice rampion to eat out of the garden behind our house, I know I shall die." Her husband, who loved her dearly, thought to himself, "Rather than let my wife die, I must bring her some rampion, let the cost be what it may." So at dusk, he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, hastily picked a handful of rampion leaves, and took them back to his wife. She made them into a salad, which she ate with great relish indeed. She liked it so very much that the next day she longed for it. I just had something pop up. Sorry, an ad came up. Okay, the next day she could have no peace until her husband descended into the garden and fetched her some more. So as soon as it was dusk, he let himself down in the garden again. But when he clambered down and was on the other side of the wall, he was terribly frightened, for there, standing before him, was the old witch with a frightful scowl on her face. "How dare you climb into my garden like a thief and steal my rapion?" she said with an angry look. "You shall suffer for it." "Ah," he replied, "be merciful to me. This time I pray you. I am only here from necessity. My wife saw your rampion from her window and had such a desire for it that she would have died had she not had some of it to eat." Then the witch's anger cooled a little as she answered, "If that is the case, I will let you take away as much rampion as you like, but on one condition, that you give me the child that your wife will shortly bring into the world, and shall go well with it, and I will take care of it like a mother." In his anxiety to get away, the man agreed to what she asked, and as soon as the child was born, the witch appeared, and having given it the name Rapunzel, which is another name for rampion, she took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower which lay in the middle of a great forest. This tower had neither stairs nor door, but only a little window way up high at the very top of the wall. When the witch wanted to enter the tower, she stood beneath this window and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down, then that I may climb up without a stair." Rapunzel had wonderful hair, long and fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the witch, she unfastened her braided tresses and wound them around one of the hooks in the little window and let them hang loosely. They fell down about 20 yards, so the witch could easily climb up by then. After things had gone this way for a year or two, it happened that one day the king's son was riding through that part of the forest and passed the tower. He had heard from someone singing so beautifully that he stood spellbound listening. It was Rapunzel, who, in her solitude and loneliness, was trying to while away the long hours by singing. The prince longed to see the sweet singer and climb up to her, but he searched in vain for a door into the tower. None was to be found. He rode home, but the song had made such a deep impression on him that he went every day to the wood and listened. One day, when he was standing thus behind, it is Rapunzel, behind a tree, he saw the old witch, which approached and heard her call. All right, all together now. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I may climb without a stair." Then Rapunzel let down her braids, and the witch climbed up to her. "So that is the ladder by which one mounts, is it?" said the prince. "Then I too will climb it and try my luck." The next night, when it began to grow dark, he went to the foot of the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I may climb without a stair." Their hair fell down at once, and the prince climbed up by it. At first Rapunzel was too terribly frightened when a man came in, for she, sorry, you distracted me, for she had never seen one before. But the prince spoke to her very kindly and told her that his heart had been so touched by her singing that he could have no peace until he had seen her. So Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her to marry him, she thought, "He is so young and handsome, and he will certainly love me far more than the old Dame Gothel does." So she said yes, and put her hand in his. I will gladly go with you, like only a 12-year-old can say. She continued, I think she's 14 at this time, but I do not see how I am to get down out of this tower. When you come, bring me a skein of silk each time, and I will weave a ladder out of them. When it is finished, I will climb down by it, and you shall take me away on your horse. They arranged that until the ladder was ready, he should come to see her every evening, bringing skeins of silk for the witch came in the daylight. The witch knew nothing of all of this till one day Rapunzel, not thinking what she was saying, made this remark. Tell me, Dame Gothel, how is it that you are so much harder to pull up than the young prince? He is always with me in a moment. Oh, you wicked, wicked child, cried the witch. What is this I hear? I thought I had separated you from the whole world, and yet you deceived me. In her rage, she seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, twisted it around and around her left hand, snatched up a pair of scissors with her right, and snip, snap, she cut it off, and the beautiful tresses lay on the ground. Then she was so hard-hearted that she took Rapunzel to a lonely, deserted place and left her to live in utter loneliness and misery. But on the evening of the day on which she had carried Rapunzel away, she fastened the braids which she had cut off onto the hook. Oh dear. By the window, and the prince came and called, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down. Thank you for the Sunday. I appreciate it. Mins, I really do. Thank you. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I may climb up without a stair. She let down the hair, the prince climbed up, but instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he found the old witch, who looked at him with angry, wicked eyes and cried mockingly, Ah, you thought to fetch your lady love, but the pretty little bird has flown, and the song is still. The cat caught it and will scratch your eyes out too. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again. The prince was beside himself with grief, and in his despair he jumped down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes out. Then he wandered blind about the forest, eating nothing but roots and berries, and constantly lamenting and weeping for the loss of his lovely bride. For some years he wandered about in great misery, and at last he came to the deserted place where Rapunzel was living. Suddenly he heard a voice which seemed familiar to him. He walked eagerly towards it, and as he came nearer, Rapunzel recognized him and fell on his neck, weeping. Two of her tears fell upon his eyes, and they became clear again, so he could see her as well as ever. Then he led her to his kingdom, where they were welcomed with great joy. And guess what they did? They lived happily ever after. Oh my. And to wrap up tonight, guess what we have? Beauty and the Beast. All right, here we go. Let's find out what these next group of teenagers got into. There once was a very rich merchant who had 3 sons. Hold on, I gotta adjust. And 3 daughters. These children had everything money could buy them. The daughters were all very pretty, but the youngest was so very beautiful that from her childhood she was always called Beauty. Isn't that the truth? The youngest is always the prettiest. This made her sisters very jealous. We weren't jealous of mine, but they were proud of their wealth and of their position in society, and took pains to be haughty with any people who were not as rich as they. One day, a merchant suddenly lost all his fortune. All that he had left was his vast property, was a little house in the country, a long distance from town. He told his children that they must go there now and work for a living. The two eldest replied that they need not leave town, for they had several lovers who would be glad to marry them. In this they found they were mistaken. Their lovers would not look at them now. Because of their pride, they had not made real friends, and nobody was very sorry to see them humbled. But everyone pitied Beauty. She had always been very kind and friendly to everyone. Indeed, several gentlemen offered to marry her, though they knew she had not a penny. But she told them she could not think of leaving her father in his trouble. When they were settled in the country, the merchant and his 3 sons set to work to till the fields. Beauty took care of the house. She rose at 4 o'clock in the morning, lighted the fires, swept the dust, and got breakfast for the family. At first she found all this very hard, for she was not used to it, but she soon grew stronger, healthier, and prettier than ever. When her work was over, she would read or play the harpsichord or sing as she sat at her spinning wheel. Her 2 sisters did not know what to do with themselves. They would get up at 10, idle away the whole day, fretting for the loss of their fine clothes and parties. "Do but see that girl," they would say to one another. "What stupid how taste she has to be content in this kind of life." But their father thought differently and loved his youngest daughter more than ever. After 2 years, when they were all beginning to get accustomed to this new life, something happened to disturb them again. The merchant received the news that one of his ships, which he had believed to be lost, had come safely into port with rich cargo. All the sons and daughters were very much excited at the news and believed that their poverty was at an end. The 2 eldest daughters were wild with joy and wanted to set out for town at once. When their father was ready to start, they begged him to bring them jewels and rings and rich dresses. Beauty was the only one of the children who had any doubt that this ship would bring back their fortune. So, not wishing to trouble her father, she asked for nothing. But her father noticed her silence and inquired, "What shall I bring you, Beauty?" "Well, dear father, since you ask me, I would like to have you bring me a rose. They do not grow here, and I am very fond of them." Beauty did not particularly desire a rose, but she didn't wish to seem to blame her sisters by saying she didn't want anything. The merchant set off on his journey. When he reached the port, he was obliged to go to the law about his cargo, and it ended in his returning home as poor as he came. He was within 30 miles of home when, in the middle of the large forest, he was overtaken by a heavy snowstorm. He lost his way and was beginning to fear he should die of hunger and cold, when all of a sudden he saw the light at the end of a long avenue of trees. As he came nearer, he found it was from a splendid palace, the windows of which were blazing with light. He entered the courtyard, but to his surprise, did not anyone meet. His horse followed him, and seeing a stable door open, he walked in. The manger was filled with hay and oats, and the poor beast, who had almost famished, fell to eating heartily. His master walked towards the palace and passed through several splendid furnished rooms, but still saw no nobody. He came to the dining room, where he found a good fire and a table plentifully spread and set for one person. As he was wet to the skin, he drew near the fire to dry his clothes, saying to himself, I hope the master of the house or his servants will excuse the liberty I'm taking. I suppose it will not be long before some of them appear. He waited for some time, and still no one came. At last, the clock struck 11, and as he was so hungry he could not wait any longer, he helped himself to some chicken and drank a little wine. Then he opened a door at the end of the hall and found himself in a room with a very good bed in it. As he was very tired, he closed the door and went to bed. It was 10 o'clock in the morning before the merchant awoke. He was getting up when he was surprised to find a new suit of clothes in place of his own, which were torn and spoiled. He looked out of the window, but instead of snowy woods, he saw the most delightful arbors filled with beautiful blooming flowers. He returned to the great hall where he had had supper the night before and found breakfast ready on a little table. He drank his chocolate and then went out to look for his horse. He was passing under the arbor of roses and remembered Beauty's request to him. He gathered a branch on which there were several roses. Immediately he heard a loud roar and saw stalking towards him so frightful a beast that he was ready to faint with fear. You are most ungrateful, said the beast in a terrible voice. I saved your life and admitted you to my palace, and in return you steal my roses, which I value more than anything in the world. But your insolence shall not go unpunished. You shall die for it. The poor merchant threw himself upon his knees before the beast and cried, Pardon me, my lord. I had no intention of offending you by gathering a rose for one of my daughters who desired me to bring her one. I am not a lord, but a beast, replied the monster. I hate flattery and compliments, so do not fancy you can move me by your fine speeches. You say you have daughters? Now I will spare you if you will give me one of your daughters. If not, promise that you will return yourself in 3 months. The merchant had no intention of sacrificing one of his daughters, but he knew that if he agreed to come back, he should see his children once more. So he promised to return. The beast told him he might set out when he pleased, but need not go empty-handed. Go back to the room in which you slept, and you will see a great empty chest. Fill it with whatever you like best, and I will have it taken to your house for you. Then the beast left him. Well, said the good man to himself, if I must die, I shall at least have the comfort of leaving my children provided for. He returned to the room and found there were heaps of gold pieces. With these he filled the chest. Then he went to the stable and took his horse and left the palace in a far sadder mood than in which he had entered. In a few hours he returned home, and his children came running out to meet him. Instead of embracing them with joy, he gazed at them sadly, holding out the branch of roses he had in his hand, and said, Here, Beauty, take them. You little know how much they have cost your poor father. Then he told them all that had happened to him. The 2 eldest sisters began to lament loudly and reproach Beauty, saying that it was all her fault. See, they said, what comes from her pride? She would not ask for such things as we did. what wanted to seem wiser than we. So now she will be the death of our poor father, and yet she does not so much as shed a tear. Why should I? Said Beauty. It would be useless, for my father shall not suffer on my account. As the Beast will accept one of the daughters, I will gladly give myself up in his stead. No, indeed, said her three brothers, that shall not be. We will go and find the monster, and either kill it or perish it in the attempt. Do not imagine you can do any such thing, said the merchant. I have seen him and know his power. It is too great, but I will not consent to Beauty's offer. I am old and have not lived long to live, so I can lose only a few years. I am only sorry for you, my children. But Beauty insisted, saying, Indeed, father, you shall not go to the palace without me. You cannot hinder me from following you. The merchant was so distressed at the thought of losing his daughter that he quite forgotten the chest filled with gold. But at night, when he retired to his room, he found, to his great surprise, the chest standing by his bedside. He decided to say nothing of his riches to his eldest daughters, for he knew they would want to return to town at once. But he told Beauty his secret, and she told him that while he was away, two gentlemen came and courted her sisters. She begged her father to consent to their marriage and give them their portions, for she was so sweet-tempered that she wished them to be happy. When the day came, Beauty got ready to set out with her father for the home of the Beast. The horse took the direct road to the palace, and they arrived there all too soon. As they approached, they found the windows brilliantly lit as before. The horse went at once to the stable of his own accord, and the merchant and his daughter went into the great hall, where they found a table loaded with every dainty and set with two plates. The merchant had no heart to eat, but Beauty, trying to appear cheerful, sat down and served both him and herself. After supper, they had heard a great noise, and the merchant began to bid his child a sad farewell. In a moment, the Beast entered. Beauty was terrified at the frightened form, but she tried not to show her fear. Good evening, Beauty, said the Beast. Have you come here willingly? Yes, she faltered. You are very good, and I am greatly obliged to you, he growled, and turning to the father, As for you, old man, you are to go your way tomorrow and never return here again. Good night, merchant. Good night, Beauty. Good night, Beast, she answered as the monster withdrew. Again, the merchant tried to persuade Beauty to go back with him, but she would not hear of it. They went to bed, thinking they should not close their eyes all night, but as soon as they lay down, they fell fast asleep. Beauty dreamed that a stately and beautiful lady came to her and said, I am very much pleased, Beauty, with the goodness you have shown in giving yourself to save your father. Do not be afraid. You shall be rewarded. Only do not trust appearances. Beauty told this dream to her father in the morning, but thought it comforted him a little. He wept bitterly when he took his leave of his dear child, for he feared he might never see her again. When her father was out of sight, poor Beauty could not help but crying, but she had made up her mind to be brave, and she proceeded to explore the various rooms of the palace. What was her surprise when she came to a door which was written, Beauty's Room. She opened it in haste and found it magnificently furnished, but with delighted her the most was the large library, a harpsichord, and several musical books. She concluded that all of this would not be provided for her if she had only a day to live, and she took courage. Her surprise increased when she opened one of the books and found on the first page in letters of gold these words: Welcome, beauty. Banish fear. You are a queen and mistress here. Speak your wishes, speak your will. You will find them granted still. Alas, she said, sighing, there is nothing I wish so much as to see my father and know what he is doing. She happened to turn towards a large mirror that was hanging near her, and there she saw her father arriving sadly at home. Her sisters had come out to meet him, and in spite of their efforts to look sorrowful, it was plain that in their hearts they were very glad to see him return alone. The picture disappeared, and Beauty felt very grateful to the Beast for thus giving her her wish. At noon she found dinner ready and was entertained at the table with music, though she could see no player. After dinner she found she was very sleepy and went to lie down in her room. She fell asleep instantly and dreamt of a handsome young prince. And he said, Beauty, you need not be unhappy here as you expect. All your wishes will be granted. Only try to find me out and love me as I love you. And above all, do not trust appearances. In the evening, she was going to sit down to supper when the Beast came and asked leave to sit with her at her table. She was frightened and tried not to show it, saying, That is as you please. No, replied the Beast, you alone are the mistress here. You need only tell me to go. If my presence troubles you, I will withdraw at once. Everything here is yours, and I shall be much distressed if you are not happy. Presently he inquired if she did not think him very ugly. Yes, said Beauty, but I think you're very kind, too. They talked for some time, and Beauty found Hasting Bug. You got it. I don't know. Hey, so welcome on M. Beauty, will you marry me? Beauty was so startled she could hardly speak, but she faltered, Oh, no, Beast. Then good night, Beauty, he said, but very sadly, and left the room. Beauty felt sorry for him, but she soon went to bed and dreamed of the unknown prince who had been in her mind all day. This time she thought he came and said to her, Beauty, why are you so unkind to me? I must be unhappy always. She could not understand it, but when she woke, she thought he must be in some way in the power of the Beast, and began to wonder how she could help him. The days passed quickly enough in the lovely place. Every evening the Beast came to her, and they entertained, talking together. Beauty began to look forward to his visits, for she had become accustomed to his ugliness and found him very kind and interesting. But one thing gave her great concern. Every night, before he left her, the Beast asked her to become his wife. One night she said to him, Beast, you make me unhappy, for I can only offer you friendship. I cannot love you. He begged her at least to promise never to leave him. But Beauty had seen in the glass that very day that her father was sick with grief at the loss of her. Her sisters were married, and her brothers had gone into the army, so he was all alone. She had so great a longing to see him that She told the beast that she should die if he refused to let her leave. Indeed, I'd rather die of grief for your absence, replied the beast, than that you should be unhappy. You shall be there tomorrow morning. Beauty promised to return in a week, and the beast told her that she had to only lay her ring on the table before she went to bed when she wanted to come back, and she would find herself in the palace. When she woke the next morning, she found herself in her father's cottage, and his delight at seeing her soon made him well again. He sent for her sisters, who came with their husbands. They were both unhappily married, one to a man who was so vain in his good looks that he cared nothing for his wife, and the other to a man who was so sarcastic that he tired everybody out with his speeches, and teasing his poor wife most of all. The sisters were so jealous at seeing Beauty so magnificently dressed, and hearing how kind the beasts were to her, that they laid a plan to detain her longer than the week she had intended to stay, in hopes that this might make the beast angry, so that he would devour her. Accordingly, when the week was over, they affected such grief at her departure that Beauty was touched by their affection and agreed to stay longer. She could not help but reproach herself for staying, but she could not make up her mind to wish herself back when they urged her so strongly. But on the 9th of the 10th day, she dreamt that she saw her beast lying half dead in the grass on the palace garden. Waking in tears, she reproached herself bitterly for her ingratitude, and rose, put her ring on the table, and went back to bed, where she fell asleep. When she awoke the next morning, she was overjoyed to find herself back in the palace. She put on one of her richest dresses to please him, and waited patiently till evening. But 9 o'clock struck, and still no beast appeared. Then Beauty remembered her dream, and ran to the garden in search of him. At last she found the path she had seen in her dream, and there lay the poor beast, senseless on the grass. Forgetting his ugliness, she threw herself on him in despair, and felt that his heart was still beating. Then she ran to fetch some water from the spring, and weeping poured it on his head. The beast opened his eyes and said faintly, "You forgot your promise. I did not care to live without you, so I determined to starve myself. But since you are come, I shall die happy." "No, you shall not die, my poor beast," cried Beauty, "for I love you. I want you to be my husband." She had scarcely spoken those words when a blaze of light streamed from the palace. Windows, fireworks were displayed, and triumphant strands of music sounded. Beauty turned to the beast to inquire what had happened, but he had disappeared, and in his place stood the prince of her dreams, whom she had loved so long. He thanked her for having broken his enchantment. "But where is my poor beast?" asked Beauty anxiously. "I am he," replied the prince. "A wicked fairy condemned me to remain in that form till some beautiful maiden shall love me and consent to marry me in spite of my ugliness." The prince conducted Beauty to the palace, where they were welcomed by a stately lady of her dream, who was the mother of the prince, and who thanked her for restoring her son to his proper form. She found her father there too. The young couple were married the very next day, and the prince and his beautiful bride were heartily welcomed by his subjects, who had long mourned his absence. Beauty and the prince reigned happily for many long years. And that, my friend, is the end of this nutty nighttime reading.